someone from Portland.
All right. You said we have somebody from Singapore even.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Pakistan, England, Canada, Florida, Texas.
Everywhere.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, when we did Camellias, we had quite an international group. I guess we have people from all over the world now again.
I love that.
Yeah, everybody loves watercolor.
And I'm visiting everybody.
Yes, we need to fly all over the world.
Idaho. Texas, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say good morning, but in some places it might not be morning anymore.
Singapore, this is probably midnight?
Probably, yeah, the opposite of us.
Yeah. Wow.
Who's from Singapore? What time is it?
Yeah. California, Ohio, Dallas. Yeah, I love that. Just an entire global community.
Yeah. Pretty amazing that we can do this.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for technology.
Okay, you want to get going?
All right, okay. All right, hello everybody. We're going to start our live event. It's 11 o'clock here in Houston, Texas. Today we will talk about painting animals. In particular, we will talk about how to capture fur, the texture of animal fur and hair, or whatever you want to call it. But we will do it in kind of effortless, loose style. So we will not be painting every hair and spending hours and hours. We will look at quick, expressive techniques. My name is Ksenia in case somebody haven't met me yet. I'm a water media artist and teacher. Diane Zimmerman is here in my studio. She's helping me with comments, talking to y'all online as well. She will be helping me with questions also as well. So don't hesitate to, if you don't understand something, didn't hear, or you want something repeated or clarified, just type it in the comment section and Diane will be watching for it and conveying those to me. If you'd like to know a little more about me, I share my art on Facebook and Instagram under my company's name, Tammy Rub Studio. So that's how the easiest way to find me. My main focus is on-demand water media classes. So watercolor, gouache, acrylics, all those wonderful mediums. I paint with them and I try to teach other artists, help them on their art journey as well with painting with those. I have a website. It's kseniaanis.com. You see it right there on my desk. That's where I publish my classes. So if you're interested, you can check them out. I just published a new one on painting animals, actually. It's an update on an existing class, and there will be a special offer for you all that we will talk about a little bit later. On this class, I also publish free video tutorials on YouTube, so check out those as well. I have a whole playlist about painting animals and pets and all that fun stuff. The channel is called Learn to Paint with Ksenia Anis, so that's how you can find me. This event today is absolutely free, but we always appreciate your help. Diane dedicates a lot of time and financial resources and her emotional resources to this group. So if you feel like you want to say thank you, here's the link. You can thank us through PayPal. Every dollar counts, helps us with art materials and stuff like that. So we will greatly appreciate it. All right, let's talk about our plan for today. We will start painting right away because I saw your comments, some people planning on painting along. So I want you to get started so the background has time to dry, right? That's main kind of thing with watercolor. We have to wait for things to dry before we can proceed. So we will start painting in just a few minutes. And while our first layer dries, we will talk about painting texture. I will show you some things that kind of you might want to consider when you paint animals, or what's the best way to capture the texture of their fur and hair. So we will talk about some techniques. I'm looking at my notes here. talk about brush strokes, and also I put that in the materials list. We will be using some salt, so have that ready. Salt is a little tricky. We will talk about it more in detail as well when we start painting. So this will be one of the materials that you will need right away pretty soon. All right, without further delay, let's start on our painting. Let me switch this over. I have my watercolor paper here. I'm going to create a little bit of an angle, guys, but I don't think it will mess up your, the way you see it or anything. I had a couple rolls of artist tape under my board so that I have maybe, 10 degrees angle. I think it's just easier to see and easier to paint this way. All right, so today we will be painting these super cute llamas. I just thought they were adorable and they're very fluffy, so they will be our example of fur texture. Before we start painting, let's kind of create a plan. Color-wise, we can go two ways. We can try to mimic these colors that we see in the reference photo. Use some sort of a ochre, maybe some brown, something like that. So this will be one way that you can go. I gave you the colors in the description, right? But I told you that it's absolutely not necessary to use these pigments. My approach is to, I like bright colors, so I don't try to recreate the colors that I see in the reference. I just use the colors that I feel like using. The only thing is just to think about it a little bit in advance, what result you're going to get, right? I'm not going to paint this background. It's going to be very abstract. I don't think capturing all those fences and the barn is that important. So I'll just create an abstract background, and the colors I picked are yellow, mostly for the background. I will drop in a little bit of green just to kind of imitate that there is a field or something behind them. And for llamas, I was going to use red, couple of reds, warmer and cooler one, just because I rarely get to paint with them and just wanted to, I thought it was a chance to use those colors. You can use oranges, you can make this a cooler palette, maybe with some blues and purples or something like that. So it's totally up to you how you want to approach this painting color-wise. I think our concentration today is on texture. And another thing is that when you look at my piece of paper, I did not draw those llamas, because I think I want to start really loosely and kind of expressively. I think having a drawing, our brain immediately starts to kind of forcing us to color in the lines, and I don't want to do it just yet. So I'm going to start without a drawing, and then we will do the drawing after the first layer dries. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, that's fine. You can transfer the drawing and just try not to color in, but just to paint loosely and, go outside the lines and things like that. And another thing is, if you look at the reference photo, they have light behind them, so they're kind of outlined with light. And I was thinking if we start with a pencil, then we will have that pencil line and we will have to cover it. We can cover it, it's not a problem if you already drew your llamas. But I'm just going to start on a clean sheet of paper with some color and some water. Do I need to clarify something, Diane? Are we good on questions?
We're good on questions.
Okay. Alrighty. So let's get started. I already sprayed my watercolors with a little bit of water. You saw me do this. And I can start painting. Let me get my big brush. This is a 1-inch flat brush. The reason I picked this brush is I will be spraying my paper with water. And if I use a round brush, it carries a lot of water in it. But I want bright background, so I need more pigment than water. And the way to pick up more pigment than water is to use a flat brush because it doesn't hold that much water. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to wet my paper. If you're following along, just grab your spray bottle, or you can do it with a brush, just with some water. And I'm using 300-pound paper, so it takes quite a bit of water. So you see I sprayed it pretty well. And I'm going to start painting. I'm going to use yellow first. That's my favorite color. It kind of goes with everything. It's easy to cover if I need to. So I'm just going to give it a little.
And it's happy.
It's very happy. It's sunshine on your page. So we're going to start with yellow. And, you know, don't worry about kind of carefully applying it or anything. Just throw it on there. Now I'm going to leave some paper white, because if you look at the reference photo, the ground is very light. So I don't want to over darken that. I want to kind of capture that effect. And to finish the edge, we can spritz it with a little more water and let it run, because watercolor will go where there is water, right? And another thing we can do is just sprinkle some paint. I'm using a round brush here because it's just easier to get the paint off of it, but you can use your flat brush again. Okay, and before this dries, we have to move kind of a little bit here, not dilly-dally. We're going to drop in the green. This is Sap Green, right into the yellow. And I'm going to put my painting. Yeah, I guess it's okay there. I'm just trying to do the same thing that I showed you in the finished painting and not stray too far away from it. Let's drop in some green to imitate that, you know, something that they have something in the back. Maybe we can sprinkle it as well. It always creates nice, interesting texture. So we're just playing with our colors, and like I said, you can use whichever colors you like. And if you get this giant drops like I did, just pick them up lightly with your paper towel. And even you can pick up some color, you know, this will create also some texture on the page. This will dry and it will lighten to 2 tones, right? So I can already tell that it's going to be very light, even though I'm picking up paint directly from the wells. I'm not mixing it on my palette or anything like that. So we need to drop in more paint because we don't want everything, you know, kind of pale. We want color. But you see my plan here, right? I used yellow and then I used green. And so mixing together, they create that illusion of sunlight, and yellow warms up the green. If I applied complementary colors on yellow, if I applied, let's say, purple, what would happen? Yellow would neutralize purple, so I would get gray, which can be a beautiful effect, you know, kind of neutral palette, but you need to consider it before you pick your colors. That's how I was saying, kind of plan a little bit before you start. All right, and the next thing we're going to do, we can kind of start on our llamas. We don't need to be precise, but I'm going to grab my red. This is primary red. I'm using Sennelier Red. And kind of eyeball it, see where, you know, they're going to be somewhere here, right? So I'm just going to drop in some red. And red and green are complementaries. So they will, you can see I'm not getting bright red because they're neutralizing, but I think it kind of works to my advantage here because those llamas are a neutral color, right? They're brown. So this will only make my painting more realistic. And here's the other one. So I'm just kind of going through the middle, approximately, without worrying too much about how it's going to work out. And I can use a little more water to get rid of this, you know, soften these edges. I can drop in more yellow if I need to. I think I need to right here. good idea to wash your brush, because if you don't wash it, it's going to muddy up your colors. And good idea to change your water from time to time too. Okay, something like this. We can even tilt our paper, make everything kind of round. And another thing you can do, if you take a dry brush, dry soft brush, you can move the pigment this way as well, and that creates interesting kind of textures, and we can soften everything if we need to. You don't have to do this. Okay, and of course, important thing to do right away would be to drop in some salt. And I'm only going to drop it where my llamas are going to be, where I approximately kind of sketched.
Is that regular table salt?
It's regular table salt,
Okay.
just white salt. And we'll talk about this in a second. Let me do this and I'll explain a little more about salt. Okay, just drop the salt in. I think that's enough. And I want to kind of spread that red a little better, so I'm going to sprinkle it on the bottom here as well. Or maybe on top too will be good. Can sprinkle more. I love splattering because it creates such interesting texture, but sometimes I feel like I'm constantly standing here instead of painting. I'm just throwing paint on
Oh, but
paper.
that's the fun part. I
Right.
love to splatter.
Right? And also, you know, when you splatter it on darker surface, it pushes the pigment away and it creates kind of interesting effect as well. So yeah, we don't even have to touch paper to create something interesting on it with watercolor. No other medium works like that. All right, this is our first layer. We are going to lay it flat. It's important to stop watercolors from moving. It needs to be flat, and we're going to let it dry. And we will talk about other things for just a second. All right. Everybody was okay with the background? I know it kind of went fast, but I didn't want stuff to dry. So if you have questions, let us know, and I'll be happy to go over some things once again for you if you need to. But
Kathy says it looks like a batik fabric. It really kind of does.
it does, yeah.
Yeah.
You can see salt is starting to absorb the paint, and it's already creating texture, but when it dries, it will be, you know, even more textured because it keeps dissolving. Alrighty. Let's talk about painting fur. So when we paint, we work with light and shadow, right? That's all it's about. We show light, we have midtones, and we have darks in every single painting, and we add highlights. So when we paint fur, what those shadows are going to look like? What do we need to understand to create realistic fur? So if we have our animal, I don't know, here's our animal, and we want to paint a shadow. If we paint the shadow like this on the animal, what's going to happen? This does not look like fur, right? Because fur is not a smooth object. It's a bunch of hair sticking out, right? If you even look at human hair, where is the edge between the light and shadow, right? Is it here or is it here? Because it's soft, the edge is not going to be hard like this. We need soft edges on the fur. And we need the shape of that shadow. Let me grab another brush. If I did, instead of this, or even if I painted this, if I used some water to soften this shadow. And I dropped in more pigment. Now this already starts to look like it's more like fur, right? Because we softened that shadow. So first thing we need to remember when we paint fur, the edge is not going to be a straight line. Like if we painted, I don't know, like a cup or some solid hard surface. And another thing we can do is what if we paint a shadow on the animal. Another thing we can do, if we wanted like more precision and more definition, instead of painting a straight line, we can do this, right? We can kind of create that texture with our brush. And so this will look more like fur than a straight line as well. So think about the edges when, first of all, when we start painting. So this will be the first thing that we need to consider. A very important question. So we're adding texture, and we're adding it where? We're adding it between the areas of light, the areas of mid-tone, and the areas of dark. So texture, I think in watercolor painting, texture is not something that's separate from our painting. It's not like we paint something and then we start texturing it. I think it looks better, it looks more natural and more painterly if we create texture during the painting, and it becomes kind of organic part of our painting. I think that will be more successful. So something to consider when we paint. And those edges can happen in two different places. We can have a light object, and then we, as usual, you know, we paint watercolor from light to dark. So we add mid-tone between light, you know, light and shadow area, and then we add darks, our usual order. But we can also paint those shadows and those textures negatively. So if we wanted, let me grab some white. If we wanted to paint, create the texture of fur on a dark object, we can use our negative painting technique, right? If we did this, this creates the illusion of fur as well. And you see, I did not paint a straight line. I painted a texture, but I painted it negatively. So we can go both ways with this. Important thing to remember when you paint texture is also that human eye sees details only when we have light, right? We're not cats. We can see at night. So we will see texture in the areas of light and mid-tone. So if I'm painting something, I would do, you know, texture where I have light. But where I have shadows, it's probably best to hold off and kind of create more kind of smooth shapes without too much texture. Because if you start texturing your shadows, they will start coming forward and your object will flatten out. So another point that I wanted to mention, I think it's important to remember. I will be showing you some paintings just a second. Let me just go through this and we will look at some examples. So we can create texture when we apply watercolor washes that we will work with edges. And another way to apply texture would be with just brush strokes, right? I already showed you a little bit here. So I would take something like a dagger brush or even a small fine tip brush. I have this Asian art brush. It's short, but it has a pointy tip. So something that has a pointy tip will work for shadows just great. And we can start, you know, painting the shadows just the usual way. This will be one way. And another way to use the brush would be to dry it a little bit on a piece of paper towel or your rag and apply texture this way. So this is called dry brushing, and it can be also very effective for creating texture with the brush. Okay, so let me show you some examples of what I'm talking about. So this painting,
Oh, I love the cats.
so these are the brush strokes that I was talking about. So this is the dark area, they're backlit, so the dark is in the center, and you see this is the midtone and this is the light, and you see the brush strokes, I kind of fan them out, and that's how I created those transitions. If I made this just a straight line, it's not going to look like fluffy dog, right? And also on the cat has all these markings. You can't paint them as just a line. So they need to be, this was dry brushed on. So you need to kind of use appropriate brush strokes, and you see them all over this painting. That's why, like here you can see it really well. That's why they look fluffy. That's how you create that fluffiness. And here's the, I painted a goat. Also bunch of kind of brush strokes to create texture, and here texture was painted with opaque white, and it was painted negatively, right? I applied it on dark with white, so it can be painted positively with darker brush strokes, or it can be painted negatively with lighter brush strokes, so whichever way you want to go. And also I used splattering here. Also helps to create kind of that spotted fur on the animal. And I also used a little bit of dry brushing right here on the head, like right here. So this is the dry brushing, and right here you can see it. So I dabbed my brush on a paper towel, and then I kind of brushed on the paint. And another example I wanted to show you are these donkeys. They're smoother because they're not as fluffy, right? So horses and all those animals will be a little bit different, and unless you're painting like Highland cow or something like that, they're very fluffy. But smoother texture can be created with just smoother washes. We need to adjust a little bit, but also I wanted to show you the ears. So inside of the ear he had lighter hair, so I brought darker paint towards it. I didn't paint a straight line, but I created that edge, kind of jagged edge, to paint again negatively. Don't have to use white, you can do it with watercolor as well, only with watercolor. So here's some examples. And with texture, well, let's move on to other mediums, and then I'll show you some more examples. Let me show you this guy.
Oh, so cute.
So you see a lot of textures. So I use different colors even to create those fanned out brush strokes, because he was very fluffy, very hairy. Looks great. You don't have to use just one color. You can go with a bunch of different colors. I added additional texture with opaque white. I splattered. He had some spots on him, so I splattered color. So all these, whatever works, we're going to use it. So don't feel shy, and don't kind of restrain yourself, because the more texture you create, I think the more realistic your animal will look. All right, another thing I wanted to show you guys, I wanted to talk about salt a little bit. Salt is tricky. It's kind of material that, I mean, we use it and hope for the best, so to say, because it does its own thing, but we can control it to a certain extent. I experimented with salt a little bit, and I noticed that if we apply it on wet surface, you're going to get bigger blooms. And the drier your paint, the less texture you're going to get. So if you don't want super pronounced texture, I'll show you my background. It's getting very textured because I dropped salt right into wet paint. So if you don't want this much texture, you might want to wait a little bit and then put that salt. If you wait until the watercolor is almost dry, of course salt is not going to work because there will be no moisture for it to absorb. And also I noticed if you tilt, this salt will start sliding on that water that's on your paper, and you will get more of lines, you know. Not, I think this works more for curly hair like our llamas, but if you want lines, you might want to try tilting your paper and leaving it that way, and then it
I've never done that.
Yeah, it will create kind of little streams in the
Like
paint.
grasses.
Right. Or you
Yeah.
can maybe try it for landscapes as well. Yeah, that might work as well. So that's what I want to tell you about salt. I'll show you an example. This, you've seen this, I posted on the group. So here's an example of salt. This was wetter, so where I applied it, and I have some granulation here, but this was almost dry. You can see a little bit of salt texture here, but this the difference between wet and dry salt application. And I think animals like sheep, llamas, and all those maybe curly-haired dogs, salt works really well, I think, for showing curly hair. If an animal has kind of longer, straight hair, I would go with brushes, with brush texture. What else we have? And of course, we can use additional materials to texture our paintings. I would do this at the end of the painting process, but I would also plan ahead for it and kind of think about it, what I want to do and why I want to do it, if it's going to work. I'm talking about materials like opaque whites. We talked about gouache. You can use white ink. I use that quite a bit. We need it for negative painting. I don't use masking. I think when you painting kind of expressively, spontaneously, it's kind of tricky to place masking in the right place. So I prefer to use opaque mediums to bring back my highlights and my lights. And that gives us opportunity to create texture with that white paint, right? And apply it the way I showed you. White pencils work great, and they will be different than paint. I have, this is Derwent. It's just white pencil, regular pencil from, I bought it in our supply store. So we have here gouache, and if I do pencil, you will see that first of all, it has a lot more texture itself because I'm drawing on watercolor paper, and it's not as opaque as gouache. It's hard for me to make that pencil super white, but we can actually use that to our advantage because not all texture will be super bright and white, right? Some of it will be kind of further away from the light. It will be a little more subtle, and then pencil will help us to create that subtle effect. Because with texture, especially when you're adding white, it's very, I would say a little goes a long way, right? You don't want to repaint huge areas on your painting with opaque white because that kind of, we moving into mixed media, it's not watercolor anymore. We can use it, but we need to use it sparingly. And we really don't need a lot of texture to hint at that the animal is fluffy. So I have this puppy.
Oh, gosh,
I'm into dogs, as you can tell. And see, just I added just a few brush strokes with white, and that gives the illusion of that smooth coat and that shine. But the rest of it I created with brush strokes. So I applied those fanned out brush strokes between the areas. This is my mid-tone and this is my dark. So I fanned out the edges and here as well. And then I applied very subtle white brush strokes, and I even tinted white with blue. It was actually, his nose was slightly wet, so my white mixed with the blue paint that I had on paper already, and that makes those highlights and the texture a lot more realistic. It's not all bright white everywhere. It doesn't need to be. The brightest highlights are in his eyes, and I have one on his ear, and that's it. Everything else is more subtle, so don't feel like it has to be all out there. Let me show you this fox as well.
Oh, wow.
So the same thing here. I did add some white. I lost it on his face and kind of on his nose, on the side of the face, but I also added some more subtle highlights with white pencil. So this was ink, I believe. Yeah, I think it's ink, but I also used white pencil to add more subtle highlights on his face and to give that sheen to his coat that helps to create the texture as well. And his legs are very smooth, so there is no texture there. I didn't do anything. I just applied smooth washes of watercolor because the fur is very short and you can't see the texture. And they're also in shadow. That's what I was talking about. See how smooth all the shadows are? We don't need texture in shadows because human eye just can't see it. Alrighty, and I'll show you Diane's favorite, the crazy duck.
Oh, yes.
So we're talking not just animals, but birds as well. You know, he's fluffy and his feathers going every which way. So I painted the base with watercolor, just throwing paint, splattering, using all my favorite colors. And then I found a little bit precision with his features. They're more smooth. So no just regular brush strokes there, and the legs are smooth. And then after I added just a few touches of opaque white, that also helped me to create form, and that also brought out that texture, you know, his little feathers sticking out in every which direction. And he has a big highlight on his beak and in his eye.
Isn't there a YouTube for this one?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
So.
There is a tutorial for this. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find it. And I'll mention, guys, also that some of these paintings that I showed you, like this puppy and the cat and dog and the donkeys, these are all tutorials from my class, Painterly Pet Portraits. If you're interested in learning more about painting animals, you can head over to my website, kseniaanis.com, and you will see the demonstrations for all of these. The class talks about texture, but it's mostly concentrated on color mixing. So if you want to create those realistic colors in animals, I explain how. And also if you want to step away from realistic colors, I also explain how to paint with this crazy rainbow palette and how to make it work. So I have a special offer going this week for everybody who is in the group, who participates in this event. I'm giving everybody $100 off discount. So the class regular price is $129.95, and you can buy it until next Sunday for $29.95. And then we'll post a link to my store. So you need to go to my website, click on store, and you will see that special offer in there on the class if you're interested in pet portraits and painting animals. All right, my background is still wet, but I have another one. Let's see, what else we need to talk about? I didn't tell you guys about pastels. Pastels are a great way to show animal fur. Along with pencils, we can use white pencil, we can use color pencils as well, but we can also use pastels. I have a few examples here. Because we're painting on watercolor paper, it's very textured, so unless you're using hot press, but I always paint on cold press paper. So when we apply pastels, they really look like fur, you know, because they kind of don't go smooth in general, but on watercolor paper, they're even more textured. And they're also easy to blend, and that also creates kind of that soft edge around the animal. So another material to consider would be soft pastels. You do need to spray your painting with fixative afterwards, with maybe what's it called, the varnish.
The Krylon.
Crayon, yeah,
varnish, yeah.
that's specifically modified for
What type
watercolors.
of pastels?
These are just regular dry pastels.
Okay, not the pastel pencil, but just...
You can use pastel pencils as well. Pastels are softer, they blend better. They also, the only thing is that if you paint really small, pastel pencils will probably work a lot better, because this requires at least, I think, 11 by 14 or something like that size, because you won't be able to get super fine line with them, obviously, right? Because they're a stick. So just think about the size, but soft pastels are definitely, I would say, something to consider for animals, and they're a lot of fun to paint with. And here's another example. I wanted to show you. This is painted with watercolor and Derwent, those Inktense water-soluble pencils. So again, I use them two ways. I will show you bigger here. So see, I scribbled here, and in some other places you can kind of see them, and I left them alone to create, jaguars, they have very short fur, so I thought this kind of creates the texture of the fur pretty realistically. But at the same time, some of them I blended with water, and I painted watercolor on top of them that created really intense shadows, and they disappeared. So I didn't draw this with a regular pencil, I just drew it with water-soluble pencils. Watercolor pencils will work as well, and that drawing kind of became an integral part of my painting. And then of course I added white ink because I had to lighten some areas and create even more texture, like on his beard and on his paws. So pastels and pencils will be one thing. Here's another example of pencils. So some of them are blended, but some of them, you see, I kind of applied a little bit of water, but at the same time, that line creates the illusion of fur. So, but I also do line and wash with watercolor. And I mean, elephants are not very textured, but they have a lot of wrinkles. So just scribbling with a marker. These are actually Sharpies, I love Sharpies. They're cheap. You can buy a whole bunch and use them. And they come in all different colors. So you can select whatever you like, what works better for your painting. And this is that Elegant Writer calligraphy marker, which is water soluble. So I also used it to draw, but also to blend some of that and create the illusion of the, all those muscles playing on the horse. And I added additional texture with white ink. So just some examples for you to consider when you have all your materials out and you feel like playing with them. So we don't have to stick to just watercolor. All right, we're doing good on questions?
Yes.
Okay, everything's clear. That's perfect. Okay, my background is almost dry. I'm still going to use the other one. I painted one extra in advance. We have to wait for this to dry completely. And then, because if you start brushing off salt right now, you're going to smudge the paint. It's going to drag the paint with it. So once this is completely dry, and we know when it's dry by the sheen and by the temperature, right? We talked about it last time. I don't see, basically, when I look at it in the light, I can see sheen. I don't know if you can see it on camera. In a few spots, I can still see sheen, and it means that the paper is still wet. But also when I touch it, it feels cool, and it means that even though the top layer is dry, the paper is saturated with water inside. So check yours, and if it still feels cool or you see that it's a little shiny, don't touch it. Let it be until it's completely dry. If it feels room temperature, then it's dry.
And that's always been my problem. I just have to tell myself to walk away and just let it dry.
And walk away is a good idea, because that lets you kind of rest and think about other things, and then you come back, you can reevaluate your painting and you can kind of start fresh. Because if we're frantically painting, and especially we get tired, you know, that's when things go wrong. So it's a good idea to leave it for a little bit. All right, I painted something very similar. Let me move it to my board so it stays in place. And this other painting, we can always use it, like this one. I'm going to either try again and paint, you know, if first painting didn't turn out, you always have something else to practice on. You already have a head start. Or you can turn it over or turn it sideways and just paint something else on top or draw something else on top. So don't feel like you're wasting paper if you try several times with the background.
I've noticed a lot of your paintings have a painting on either side.
Right.
She does not waste paper.
I did a reel on Instagram. It got like thousands of views because this this is what I do to save paper. Yeah, 300-pound paper is expensive, but you can use both sides, so it's a big advantage of buying it. And if you buy loose sheets, it's nearly not as expensive as pads, and blocks are the most expensive, of course, because, you know, they have to do so much work
for the convenience.
Right, they already got it all glued for you and put a cover on it and everything. Alrighty, we will continue working on our llamas because I want to show you the full demo so you know what we're doing. Now we need to figure out where our llamas are going to be. So we have our blobs, but this is when we need to find llamas in the blobs. What I like to do is I print out my reference photo to size that I'm going to paint, or approximately. So here's my printout, and I put charcoal on the back side of it, and then I transfer the drawing. I can't draw these llamas, but if I start drawing, I might start in the wrong spot and I will want to move them or something, and it's going to be a bunch of lines, and I don't want those lines. So that's, for me, a good enough reason to just transfer the photo, at least approximately. Give me some starting point, and then I can draw them in more detail. And, you know, if you have trouble with drawing, this will help you as well, because you will have at least something to go by and have some fun painting instead of, you know, spending time trying to draw them. So this is charcoal. I'm going to rub it on the back side. You can use just smooth, soft graphite. That will work as well.
Like a 2B or 4B or something like that?
I would go with like 6 or 8B.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, really something really soft. Okay. Charcoal is easier because you can, like I'm doing, put it on the side and just cover a big surface real quick. The only thing, it's pretty messy, so keep things away from your painting. And then I'm going to place it, and now I can place it where I want it to be, right? So I'm going to kind of look at my painting. So my llamas need to be somewhere like maybe a little bit lower. And you can take a pencil or just use the back side. This is not going to work, but some brushes have kind of pointy ends, so this will work as well. Just transfer the outlines. And here, firmer pencil will work actually better. And I'm pressing pretty hard, guys. You don't want to rip paper or anything, but you know, you want the charcoal to transfer. And the second llama is going to be somewhere here. I need to draw the eye. I already used this, so I have all the lines. Just giving myself some guideline where I want things to be. because especially on this one, the angle is a little difficult, so we probably want to, know where to put stuff. Okay, this is what I get. So I have a very, this is not, wants to stay. So I have a kind of faint outline. I can go over it one more time with pencil.
So the question, why didn't you transfer the llamas before doing the background?
You can, but for me it's a little restricted. If I see something drawn on paper, I instinctively start kind of coloring inside the lines. I'm kind of starting to paint llamas, and it will be much harder for me to create that background and, paint loosely like I did before, because I was just throwing paint on paper instead of, actually painting the llamas.
I think that's why I get so tight, because if I have a line there, I want to stay in it.
It's just mentally hard.
This is freeing.
Yeah, it's mentally hard to get yourself removed from that line drawing. And also, this, guys, I'm sure, but reminding you once again, if you put watercolor on paper and you paint watercolor on top of it, there's no way to remove those lines. So you need to be sure that that's where you want them to be. And again, it might be a little bit restricting when you paint the background. Alrighty, so we have these. We can outline them with a pencil. If you start painting on charcoal, it's just going to wash away and you won't see your drawing anymore. So you can go over this with a pencil once again, but I think we can take this a step further and just use color pencils that we talked about, right? So I'm going to grab, and I don't like to use just one. I like to use different colors. So I have some greens and some reds going on here. So I'm using green, brown. I have a purple one here, violet, but we'll see if I'll use this one or not. But I'm thinking maybe at least two. This will kind of look good with my painting. So
these are just regular colored pencils.
These are just regular. No, okay. You can use watercolor pencils, no problem with that. But just remember they're going to run, so you need to plan for that as well and kind of be aware that that's going to happen. I think regular color pencils will be good. So I'll just with the outline, don't encase your llama into a rigid line. Just draw that outline in a few places where you see dark areas, and that will be enough, because we will keep painting them and you will build tone and you will build color. Don't feel like this needs to be a finished piece of art. Just a few hints of where things are going to be, so we can start kind of developing this this painting further. The eye. And there will be hair here somewhere. There is the ear is somewhere here. And I mean, llama is not going to be upset if you don't draw the hair exactly or something. It's not like you're drawing somebody's portrait, so don't worry about it too much. Maybe a lighter pencil will work good as well, because we have, they're outlined with light. And the good thing, if you draw this with a regular pencil, you now can erase. And if you draw this with a color pencil and it's not exactly right, we can also cover it with, a pink white or something like that. We can work with this further, so no pressure or anything like that. So the nose is somewhere here. You probably want to do the features pretty distinctly because they're dark, and the rest of it can be very sketchy. And let's do the other one. Let's see, this one is done. Yeah. Okay, and let's just kind of hint at the other one. It's got mouth here. I'll use a lighter pencil on this one as well. And the ear is going to be somewhere here. Yeah, I'm not using that violet. I think brown and green is sufficient, and that light green is good. Guys, and I think you understood, right, that after the salt dried, I brushed it off. So I only have that texture left, but the salt is all gone. And you have to really brush it because it's going to be stuck to your paper. But just take a brush or with your hand, just get rid of it. Usually do it over my waste paper basket or something like that, so it's not all over the floor. Okay, so here's our drawing. Let me show it to you a little bit closer. So I did not create a solid dark line. I broke it up in quite a few places. This is all charcoal, it's going to be washed away. I broke it up in several places and also used a couple different colors. And if you do it with watercolor pencils, it will be especially interesting. It will, you will get some of those runs, but when you touch the watercolor pencil with water, it will create additional interest and texture as well. But even with a regular pencil, you can see a little color difference, and that makes the painting that much more interesting. All right. To continue painting, I'm going to switch to a round brush, maybe even my bigger brush. This is number 14, I believe, yeah. I'm going to create that angle again. And now I need to paint, so I have light, right? I have some dark accents that I created with pencil, but I need to paint mid-tone and dark areas. And here we start doing what we talked about, those fanned out brush strokes, those soft edges, but we're going to work with what we already have, right? We don't want to, that's why we created that textured watercolor. We don't want to fight against it. We want to make it work to our advantage. So you don't want to cover everything again with a smooth wash. You want to preserve some of that beautiful texture that makes those llamas look like they're fluffy, they have curly hair. You want to preserve some of that texture. See that kind of blossom that I got here? I probably want to save it, at least some of it. So again, a little bit thinking forward, a little bit of planning is required. I'm going to paint with, this is Magenta Permanent by Sennelier. So this is a cool red. I painted with warm red, but I want this, because I have that warm light in the painting, I want the shadows to be cooler. So I'm going to use cooler red to paint the shadows, okay? And so if you're using different colors, you need to kind of use the opposite temperature color for your shadows, right? I don't know.
That's important.
Yeah, because otherwise you won't get volume. It's going to look like an illustration. It's going to look flat. Yeah. And by the way, which reminds me, I just published an ebook, a quick reference guide for light and shadow. It's also on my website on the homepage. You will see it on the upper right corner. It's called Light and Shadow Reference. And I talk about which temperature color to pick and which shadows, all the terminology, what's core shadow, what's cast shadow. So if somebody needs a little help with that, you can just download. It's a free ebook on my website.
I'll be doing that when I get home.
Okay.
Shadows are tough.
Yeah, I show different subjects and kind of, it's all the same principle, but I think when you see it on different subjects, you kind of start to understand a little better. All right, so let's paint the shadows on our llamas. I see a shadow right here, and with shadows it helps to squint when you look at your subject, right? That way you see light and shadow a lot better instead of seeing all the details. So I'm going to squint and I'm going to paint the texture. So these are dark midtones, right? We're not doing darkest accents yet. So I'm applying paint fairly transparently. And I'm fanning out my brush strokes to create that texture. I already have some texture, but I want more. And we need to kind of follow the features of the llamas. And the nose is going to be darker and smoother also. I love their crazy fringes that they have on top, so we're going to maybe even exaggerate that a little bit. And you see, I'm getting rid of texture in shadows because, like we talked about, we're just not going to see it. And it's going to make our painting flat if we texture the shadows too much. So I'm going to kind of try to save this and connect these two areas. And I think you guys will agree, even though from, you know, especially from those paintings that I showed you, even though I'm not using realistic colors, my llamas are going to look, and my animals look three-dimensional and they look realistic. So it's not about the color. Okay, so this is this guy. Let's
I really like how it looks painting over the salt, the texture. That's
yeah,
really...
you can still see some texture,
Yeah.
that's true. Especially if we smooth out the edges. Before this dries, guys, I'm going to drop in more color, and I'm going to mix my magenta maybe with even, I'm going to use more magenta, but I'm cooling my magenta even more with some green, that sap green that I used, so I can paint darkest areas immediately. I don't want this to dry because, again, I want those soft edges. I want to be able to control the edges. So we have to move fairly quickly. And we're going to make the replay. It's going to be available on Facebook, but I will also post it on my YouTube channel if you want to share it with somebody, recommend to watch it. So it will be available for everybody and you can watch this again. I know I'm moving pretty fast, but yeah, I'm kind of have to with these guys to prevent them from drying. And the nose is going to be very dark. Let me smooth this out. Yeah, don't try not to draw like his nose and his mouth. Look for shapes, right? Because that's how we create realism. It's not an illustration of smiling llama, right? For a children's book, we want that realistic effect, and that way we need to kind of step away from painting too many details, and that's actually adds realism to our painting, even though it kind of sounds counterproductive, but that's how you create realistic painting, is avoiding too many details, no matter how tempting they are to, to paint. They look so cute with their little eyes and noses and everything, but resist the temptation. And you see, guys, my brush is starting to get too small for me to cover the area, so just pick up a bigger brush. Don't try not to mess around for too long and things will start drying. Just pick up a different brush. And using the same colors everywhere unifies our painting, right? We all know that. If you use a million different colors, it's probably not going to be, it will be hard for you to unify it, to make everything harmonious. So I know it's tempting to use as many colors as possible, but it's hard to work with many colors, much harder. Okay, so this is going to be this guy. Let me smooth out his back, and this underneath it's all going to be darker, so we can unify this a little bit. This is too bright. Okay, let's work on the other one. You can see the shadow very clearly on this one. It just goes all along here. And I don't want a hard edge, so I'm going to smooth it and also spread it a little bit And let's paint his ears. There's a tiny little area of light underneath the ears, kind of around the ears, I should say. Here's his eyes. And the other ear. And his mouth, his face is going to be darker here. Kind of connect them together. They're kissing or doing something there. Okay. And maybe just a couple of darker accents on this one as well. Definitely need to darken the eye and inside the ear. And this ear needs to be a lot darker. Okay, and maybe the face needs to be darker.
Wow, it's coming together.
Yeah, they're starting to look like llamas.
Yeah.
But I know, guys, it doesn't look right because we have no highlights. So be patient. We're going to be adding them in just a second. Another thing I wanted to tell you, see how I have texture here? So it looks like sparks coming out of them. You probably don't want this. So it's very easy to just apply another wash of color, and if you kind of scrub a little bit with the brush, you'll be able to smooth it all out. And
oh wow.
yeah, we'll just get rid of this because we don't need that texture there, and blend it with the rest of the painting. I like this, so we're going to keep this. Maybe smooth this one a little bit. So they do have sparks coming from their kissing, but not quite so pronounced. Can do even more splattering if we need to. I like using every color that I used in the painting for splattering. That unifies it even more. And I don't like that thing here, so let me get rid of it. Lighten this a little bit, create soft edge. All right, maybe let's get rid of this as well.
So what color did you use to add to your magenta? Was that Sap Green?
Sap Green,
Okay.
yeah. Green is complementary of red, so it will neutralize the red, right? But of course, depending on which pigment you use, but generally works like that. Okay. So we have our llamas. Last thing we need to do is create the highlights. If you look at the reference photo, they have their backlit with very bright light. So we want that light in our painting. And by the way, guys, if you want to, this is still wet, but it's not as wet. We can still drop in some salt on this. This is pretty much dry, but I'll drop it right here. So you can continue working with salt. It's not going to be as pronounced as the first layer, but you know, maybe you want some more of that texture there. Okay, let's add our whites. I'm going to use my gouache. I have it right here. Easy to see, right? If we squint again, when we look at the reference photo, we see those highlights really clearly. So let's just paint them with, I'm using dagger brush. I want those feathered out brush strokes, remember, right? So we don't want some big thick brush. Liner brush will work. Even if you have a small, this is a little bit big, but if you have a small flat brush, that will be good too. So kind of don't go too heavy handed on those. And we can go into, give them even more texture. So I see very bright highlight here. Of course, their fringe is all very bright. It's a little bit of highlight here. And you see, with the highlight, I'm covering that pencil line. So if you don't want that pencil line, it's very easy to correct with our highlights. And again, lighter areas are just shapes. So don't paint, you know, like features or something like that. Just try to keep it abstract.
And you're backlighting it now. That's really
Right. And I'm again not creating a straight line because I want the texture. And also not a solid line, right? Once you encompass something in a solid line, that stops breathing. It's a certain style of painting, but it's not our style. We want things to breathe. So I'm breaking up those white lines. I broke up the dark lines. So everything needs to kind of move and be connected to each other. So that's why it's so important. Okay, and I want to show you something else, guys, very important here. Let me give this guy a little bit of highlight here on the bottom, maybe. If you look at this llama on the right hand side, the highlights are not white, right? The contour, if you look at the contour, especially around that ear that's closer to us, the highlight is not white. So that's what we were talking about. They need to be varied and they need to have certain gradation. I try to leave lighter areas here, but if you need more and you need more precision, there what you can do, I'm using artist gouache, which is the same binder as watercolor. So it's basically just opaque watercolor paint. So what I can do is pick up some watercolor pigment, clean my brush, of course. You don't want to contaminate your colors with gouache. I'm going to pick up some of that yellow that I was using before, and I can tone down my white with some watercolor. So I'm getting opacity, but it's not bright white anymore, and I can add those differentiated highlights in some areas where I see them in the reference photo. So don't feel like you need to go all super bright and white everywhere. And I'm going to feather out my brush strokes. I can do some more here. Maybe some more on this guy. His fringe needs to be a little bit lighter. And he has some lighter hair inside the ear. But it's not white. Maybe some here.
I've never added color to the white gouache. That's really...
It greatly expands your
Yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah.
And if I need to correct the drawing, I can do it at this stage as well. So it has a little bit more of an upper lid here. So a regular color pencil is hard to use on wet paper, but if certain areas dried and you want to make corrections, you can go in now and make that addition, correction. Okay, and we need to do the ear, right? That's what we were talking about. So the ear will be highlighted with some color, and it will be maybe lighter. And see, when it sinks into the paint is still wet there, but it kind of sinks into the paint. It creates an interesting effect as well. It's not as bright, so we can add some tonal variation that way as well. Alrighty. And if some highlight is too bright, we can tone it down now again too, right? Give him some wrinkles. This is dry brushing, so we can use that as well. My paint starts to dry, I can apply it this way. All right, and I feel like I need a little bit of white here. Let me grab some. Maybe I can use white pencil right here. I feel this needs to be just a little bit brighter.
So that's pastel pencil?
It's regular color pencil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Alrighty. So always sign your painting if you're happy with it. And here are the llamas. They're still shiny because the gouache hasn't dried yet, but I'll show you a little bit closer.
Okay, Nancy's asking, how many times have you painted this reference?
I painted it once before, so this is the first one that I did, and this is what I did today. I think actually this one turned out better because it looks more fresh. I kind of overworked this one a little bit, but you know, they're similar. I do like how I did darker splattering. Let's do that. Good idea, Nancy, that you asked me about it. Maybe a little more contrast on the background. It just gives it so much movement and, you know, visual interest. If, you know, worried about splattering your llamas, you can hold like a piece of paper and splatter this way. That way you will protect them from splatters, unwanted splatters.
So Kelly's asking, how long have you been painting?
I've been painting, I opened Tamirab Studio in 2015, so that's when I started painting full time and teaching, but I've been painting since 2010, and I've been doing watercolor probably last 5 years almost exclusively. I started with oils. I painted with watercolors in college, and I thought, this is so hard, I just can't paint. And the teachers were like, you're terrible, you need to quit doing this. You know, very encouraging. And I thought, well, I just can't paint. But when I tried oils, I thought, oh gosh, this is so much easier than watercolor. And it's actually the thing about opaque mediums. Watercolor is one of the hardest mediums to paint with, and if you're struggling with like showing form and understanding how colors work, I think starting with an opaque medium like even gouache, it's widely available, it's inexpensive, it's much easier to work with, and once you figure out how to paint, then you can switch to watercolor, and I think you will be, you know, it will just make your process a lot easier. So I painted with oils, I figured out how it's done, and then I switched to watercolor. And I think, you know, I kind of recommend doing this but if you're determined to paint with watercolor, it's a beautiful medium. I understand, you know, you can't beat it, that transparency and all the texture and effects. It's really cool. Right, Diane? You like all mediums, though.
Yeah, I do. I have never done oil.
Okay.
It intimidates me a little.
It's a lot of cleanup, yeah.
I don't like to clean.
Yeah, you can't leave your brushes.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, the color is really beautiful, but I think we can achieve kind of similar results with gouache and acrylics, too. You know, great medium, easy, wash your brush and go eat supper and you're done. All right, any more questions, guys, about this? Don't forget to visit my website, check out that class. There is a preview video you can watch, and I tell you everything you will learn in that class, so you can, you know, kind of consider if that's something that you're interested in. And the discount is good for 1 week, so check it out, and I'm giving everybody a good price, so you can take advantage of this offer. Any more questions then?
I'm answering.
Okay, Diane is answering it herself, so that's good. I'm going to lay this flat so everybody can see. And yeah, see guys, I painted those highlights here and I left the painting at an angle, and the color started to run down, so it can be an interesting effect, but that's why I'm telling you that to dry the painting, we need to lay it flat. And if you were using thinner paper and it warped, it's no big deal, right? I think we'll probably try that at some point. You turn it over, you spritz it with paper, a little bit when it's dry, obviously. Spritz it with paper, you put some books on top and leave it for a few hours or overnight, and it will straighten. And I know people get upset about warped paintings, and it's very unpleasant. You know, you worked on something and it's all wavy, but I only worry about it when I frame something. I straighten it and then I put it in a frame, because that way it will stay flat. Because if you straighten it and you leave it and there is still humidity in the room, it's going to warp again to some extent, maybe not as much, but don't worry about it. You know, if you're framing, then straighten your paintings. Alrighty, anything else I need to answer?
I don't think so. Just a lot of thank yous.
Oh, cool. Yes, this was great, guys. And I'm looking forward to you all posting your paintings on the group. And I'm going to take a look at all of them, and Diane too. And we're looking forward to seeing what everybody done. And they don't have to be llamas. Maybe you can try that technique on some other animal. Maybe you have a good picture of your pet. You have a cat or a dog or some other animal. You know, just think about what kind of fur they have, if they're smooth or you need a lot of texture, the curly hair, and maybe try this on some other animal. You know, that will be great to see what everybody did and what colors everybody picked, because you don't have to pick the same colors. They can be anything.
Okay, what gouache would you recommend?
I always use artist gouache. The brand I'm using is M. Graham. This is considered, you know, artist grade, high quality gouache. But the main thing is to do a little bit research, and it needs to either say artist gouache or it needs to say gouache. Brands like Royal Talons, I think, Diane, right? It's called Royal Talons. Right. They make gouache. This has Gamma Arabic, the same binder as watercolors, so it's water soluble and you can re-wet it with water, so it's not going to dry to a solid film like acrylic gouache does. Or if it just says gouache, they use dextrin, which is potato starch, and that's, you can lift it as well, because if I do something and it dries and then I'm thinking, oh, this is too straight, I want to kind of soften it, then I can see I'm lifting the paint. With acrylic materials, you can't really do this. So that's why I use artist gouache, and you can mix it with watercolor. It will mix smoothly.
And some brands have acrylic gouache and the water soluble gouache, like Holbein.
Holbein has both.
And
yes.
I got the acrylic one once, and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And I looked at the tube and I'm like, oops.
Well, it's fun to paint with it because it gets, you have beautiful, that kind of matte texture, and it's easy to paint with, but I wouldn't use it with watercolor. So we're talking about combination with watercolor. So our artist gouache. Yeah, Holbein has both. Some brands like Reeves, they sell sets, and they're almost like children's paint, but it's really good gouache. So it has white on it. So if you just want to try it, you don't have to pay, you know, premium prices for gouache.
Any other questions?
All right, guys. Yeah, we're getting close to the end, and you know, Diane and I are always on the posting on the group and talking to everybody, so if you think of something after this session, just let us know. And the preview should be, replay should be available in just a few minutes after we finish, so if you want to rewatch it, and maybe, you know, I was painting pretty quickly, so if you wanted to see something again, you will be able to, at the same link, same event. All right.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, guys. It was real fun. We will try to do this regularly.
Yes. We need to paint Cucumber, my cat.
Oh, yeah. Cucumber will be our model. So.
Okay.
Bring her here and we will paint her. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.